as the channels get noisier and noisier and noisier, you basically have to show up more and more and more and more. And that is really the only way to truly break through. Yeah, you could break through because you produce one viral video, but is that really going to be your strategy?
As I think about like the history of the way we communicate with each other as humans, right? Like from letters to radio to TV to the internet to now, something has to be fundamentally true about how we communicate.
What I think everyone needs to be very aware of is that if you're using AI to just pump out more and more content and you're not at least heavily editing that content so that it feels like you, there's a weird kind of uncanny valley thing happening for me where I'm talking about like cadence of sentence structure and are we losing our humanity in the process?
Look, we use it at Seymour Center. We use it in Designing Tomorrow. We're all using it.
Are we going to do an AI episode finally?
We're doing an AI episode.
Oh, crap. All right.
I'm Eric Ressler.
I'm Jonathan Hicken.
And this is Designing Tomorrow.
Eric, over the last several months, I've been asking my team to put a lot more time and energy into Google Ads. And we're seeing some results, don't get me wrong. But over the winter break, I just had this like nightmare moment where it occurred to me, I was like, are people even planning what to do on a weekend by searching Google anymore? Are they just asking ChatGPT to plan their weekend for them? If so, how do I get my results higher on ChatGPT? Like, what does it look like to get into those results? In any case, my mind started spinning about how so many things are changing about content and algorithms and everything. And it made me feel like we are going through a great content reset.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly feels like where we're at right now.
So I want to spend today kind of unpacking some of these major changes that you're seeing, particularly on the cosmic side of things, the organizations you're working with, and how we as brands can be preparing for this great content reset.
Yeah, let's riff on it, man. I mean, I feel like we are in the middle of this very fluid media internet transition right now. And I don't know where it shakes out. I think AI is definitely a major lever in that, but I think it's not the only lever either. And so, yeah, let's get into it. I mean, where do you want to start?
Yeah, so let's just start with AI itself. And I know a million people have commented on
Are we going to
this.
do an AI episode
We're
finally?
doing an AI episode.
Oh, crap. All right.
No, not all AI. Not all AI. But
Okay.
but let's start there because we use it
Yeah.
at Seymour Center. We use it in Designing Tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're all using it. But for social impact leaders who are trying to think about how they're building a brand and how they're putting themselves forward at a time where we've been hearing things about how authenticity matters and individuals matter, what is the advice that you are giving to your clients, or what advice would you be giving if asked, how should I be preparing for this great content reset?
So let's stick with AI for a second. So to me, AI is kind of like an acceleration of an existing trend of like lower and lower bars or barriers to content production. You know, often it's these kind of trends are driven by technological innovation, right? So you think about, the common example is like the printing press, like creating this democratization of information at a level that, now no longer do books need to be hand scribed like one letter at a time by probably slaves. I'm not a historian, but that's probably what happened largely, right? And then you fast forward and you get to, TV and radio and the internet and like all these different modalities. And now, to me, like I even have noticed this in like production of like making a brand video. It used to be a $250,000 investment because you needed like a whole TV crew and sometimes those videos still need to be made and they're still made that way. But also everyone can just like shoot themselves, in a selfie iPhone video and post it on TikTok and get more views than those brand videos are getting right now. So media is always changing. Technology is always changing. Media and technology are like two sides of the same coin. And to me, AI is not quite the same as that, but it's part of that. And what I mean by that is now the ability to pump out large volumes of content essentially effortlessly is more possible than ever before. Now, the quality of that content and the resonance of that content is definitely not guaranteed. And I'd be happy to kind of break down how I'm thinking about AI and how we're using it, for our work at Cosmic and where we're very much not using it and where we are using it. But to me, it's kind of like it's like part of that trajectory. I think what's different about AI is that it's not just a technology used by humans. It's becoming more and more a technology that acts on its own as we are starting to get into like agentic AI and discussions of AI replacing the workforce and, the potential bubble around all of that. And my general takeaway is AI is a transformative technology. We just don't know what exactly it's going to transform and how it's going to transform culture yet.
I'm thinking about two interviews you did recently, one with Mike, one with Amanda, and the two messages from those two that stick out to me. I mean, Mike said something like quantity is king or something along those lines, where you got to produce a lot of content to matter. But Amanda said people follow people, not brands. So what that tells me is one person has to produce a lot of content. So isn't there just this like tug towards using AI because you need to be producing a lot?
Yeah. So you're just for listeners, you're referencing Mike Nellis and Amanda Littman, two interviews we've had in our Spotlight series, which we'll link to in the show notes. Both interviews definitely worth digging into. Awesome, super smart, amazing leaders in the social impact space. Okay, so if we want to point to like this volume play that Mike is pointing to, which I think is real to a degree, and he comes a lot from the political space, but also works with social impact orgs, is that as the channels get noisier and noisier and noisier, you basically have to show up more and more and more and more. And that is really the only way to truly break through. And I don't think he means it's the only way, but it's the most sure way. Yeah, you could break through because you produce one viral video. But is that really going to be your strategy? Like, how many times people come to us saying, hey, we need to make a viral video? Great. We can totally do that. No problem. And we know exactly. No, of course not. Right. Like, there's a certain amount of luck and like perfect alignment with the zeitgeist for viral videos to come out. I've had posts on LinkedIn go like LinkedIn viral, which is like so nerdy to say that I'm sort of ashamed. It just came out of my mouth. But, those posts don't move the needle as much as you think that they do and especially if there's no like follow through and consistency after the fact. So Mike's pointing to this consistency element, this quantity element. And Amanda's pointing to something that I think is related but different, which is that the era of brands influencing people as brands only, as these kind of faceless corporations or companies that don't have strong human leaders at the forefront from a communication standpoint, is basically over. But I think there's a lot of coherence between what we're seeing there and what we're seeing in the social impact space, which is that people naturally want to follow people. People naturally connect with people. People naturally want to hear and get information from people over institutions. Good and bad things about that, but let's be real, that's kind of where things are going.
Yeah, and I totally understand that, but I'm like in my seat as executive director, right? If I'm taking their two pieces of advice and I'm combining those two things.
Yeah.
Right? Where I'm like, people need to follow a person. Who's that person going to be? Let's just imagine for a second it's me.
Yeah.
Okay, for Seymour Center.
Sure.
And I'm like, I also need to do quantity.
Yeah.
So now it's all on me to produce a lot of quantity, and that is pulling me, bringing us back to AI. That is pulling me towards, well, fuck, like AI is going to be the thing that helps me achieve that.
Yeah.
As long as the AI sounds like me.
So I see how you get there, and I don't even think that's necessarily the wrong assumption. And let's just like open the Komodo a little bit here. Like, do we use AI for the show here? Yes, but we use it in very intentional ways. So like, we don't use AI to like write content for us in terms of like, I mean, first of all, it's a podcast. So like our podcast format, we have a few different flavors of content at this point, but we're just riffing on a conversation here. Like AI is not doing anything here
in the room.
But before we prep for this episode, we did use AI to figure out how are we going to frame this, right? And that helped us hone in on what we're going to focus on. So there's a lot to wrestle with here, in my opinion. I do frankly have concerns about some of the ethics of AI. As an artist, as a creative person, especially as it relates to like some of the quote unquote pure forms of art, like music and like film, where these companies have come in and essentially just trained their models on human expression and created the ability for anyone to essentially like steal and repurpose that. Like that still makes me feel icky at some level. And also I'm like a geek and a tech nerd, and I'm enthralled by the possibilities of, I think, the very real value that AI can have even today, and even more so where it's going when used responsibly, when used in the right ways. But what I'm noticing, and what I think everyone needs to be very aware of, is that if you're using AI to just pump out more and more content, and you're not at least heavily editing that content so that it feels like you. There's a weird kind of uncanny valley thing happening for me where the more you use AI, the more it's easy to spot AI. And I'm not talking about M dashes here. I'm talking about like cadence of sentence structure and, different little like tells that something is AI. And I saw a post the other day of like, it showed up in a printed book with like the ChatGPT, like, would you like me to reformat this in this way? And it's just like, ugh, these like cringe moments that's just like, are we losing our humanity in the process? Or is it becoming more intertwined with technology? I mean, we're starting to get into some sci-fi stuff here.
Yeah, I mean, this is clearly very personal to you because you're a musician and a creative person in many ways. But like, how can an executive director or a marketing leader look at this great content reset and see this world of possibility in the form of AI and see the risk? How do we make decisions about how to make content or marketing or branding moves with AI right now? How do we even make that decision?
I mean, I think it depends where you're starting from. One way to use AI that I think is helpful and constructive and doesn't reduce the humanity of the work, if we want to kind of frame it that way, is like a editor or like an executive producer or like a riff partner. Hey, I'm kind of thinking about doing something like this. Like, ask me some questions, like interview me and like help me refine my thinking. And then use that to draft a post or to create a podcast outline or whatever the format of the content is. So less as a creator and more as like a sparring partner. And that's how I use it mostly. I think it can also be really good to, when you've created a draft at something, to have it not like edit it as like an editor, but to like review it for its strengths and weaknesses and like, ask it to put itself in the shoes of your target audience. What questions might they still have? Like, to me, that's like a good low-hanging fruit way to use AI that isn't the same as just like, hey, ChatGPT, make me 5 LinkedIn posts about, social impact marketing in 2026. And then you're going to get what you get out of that. But you're coming at it more from a like, oh man, I need to make more stuff. It needs to be about me and human. I don't have the capacity to do that on my own. So do I just go to AI? I honestly think the answer is mostly no. I think AI shows up in the kind of like framing and idea generation or like refining side of it, that sparring partner angle. And I think there's a need still for some human level of curation in that process. Like, so open the Komodo again. Like, we have human editors working on our work. We have Edith, who's awesome. Shout out Edith for editing this one. And, she's doing creative work in this moment, right? When do I cut? When do I not cut? Either out of the episode or between angles or whatever. And, AI can do that. We're on a system that does auto cutting, but it doesn't do as good of a job as Edith does still, right? Now, is that going to be true in 2 years or 3 years? Like, this is all very fluid. But I think that the idea of just like, I generate content, I feed it into the AI machine and I get it out to the masses, I don't think that's got longevity unless the technology continues to improve in meaningful ways. Hey friends, real quick before we continue today's episode. I'm Eric Ressler, founder and creative director at Cosmic. Cosmic is a creative agency purpose-built for nonprofits and mission-driven organizations. For the last 15 years, we've helped leaders like you nail your impact story and sharpen your strategy. But we're not here to just leave you with a fancy slide deck and a pat on the back. We roll up our sleeves and help you bring our ideas to life through campaigns, creative, and digital experiences. Our work together helps you earn trust, connect deeply with your supporters, and grow your fundraising and your impact. If you value the thinking we share here and want it applied to your biggest challenges, let's talk at designbycosmic.com. All right, back to today's conversation.
But I want to take us over to another conversation about the great content reset, which has to do actually with an article that Derek Thompson, the author Derek Thompson, wrote recently, and it was called "Everything is TV."
Yeah.
Or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think it was Everything is TV. Yeah.
Yeah, and essentially his argument is that forms of media are converging into sort of like a single format and single distribution method.
Yeah.
Right? The perfect example is like Netflix is now live streaming podcasts, right? Like Netflix is. And so if that is true, if everything is indeed becoming TV, How do social impact leaders need to think about their brand or think about their message or their position or strategy differently?
Well, I think I should start by saying that I don't fully buy Derek's argument.
Fair enough.
I believe it. I believe there's truth to that. I think the headline is maybe slightly sensational in that it implies that all other forms of media are going extinct, which I just don't think is quite true. What I do think is true is that if you are running a social impact brand right now in 2026, you need something that is TV in your stack, right? Like you need some kind of raw, uncut, video first content in your feeds. For us at Cosmic, that's what the podcast is. I don't have other video content for Cosmic. There's really not. I mean, I could do other video stuff. I could create, motion graphics, breakdowns on case studies or whatever. My hope and my goal, both from a marketing standpoint and in service to the sector and a way for me to just kind of like think out loud through publishing, is like, I want to share my thinking on the sector and how this work should be done. And I've often thought about the question that I try and answer in my work is, how can and should design be applied to social impact for the greater good? Like that's what I spend every day thinking about, directly through my client work or just more esoterically as like my professional ambition. And the podcast has been my most effective, is not quite the right way of saying it, but my most meaningful channel to do that. And it feels the most like you get Eric the most through the podcast. And that's true also. Like we have, last year I started rolling out newsletters that are a little bit different, more kind of podcast-esque, and actually like voiceover recordings of those. And that's still a little bit more me than other stuff that we put out, like guides or articles or things like that. So I think the reason why we all just are attracted to this so much is because it feels the most like getting to know someone in real life, and it taps into our human psychology. I think that gets taken even to a further degree when you start to talk about like short form video platforms like TikTok, where there's this hacking of psychology. And I think full disclosure, I'm not like an active TikTok user, so I might be out of touch and boomery on this, but TikTok and YouTube by extension have become these like this kind of amalgam of different types of media, but like very hyper optimized for attention, right? When you think about the packaging in the first 30 seconds, and on TikTok, like people know intuitively whether or not they're going to watch TikTok after like milliseconds. So it's like, it has this veneer of being very like authentic, but also this like kind of like there's someone behind the curtains thinking very deeply about how to optimize for like hacking human psychology too. So it's this weird amalgam of both those things for me.
To the point that Designing Tomorrow has felt for you like the most meaningful way to express your ideas and what you think the sector needs. Like, first of all, congratulations, you're doing a great job. Also, it makes me think like, if every listener went out and created a Designing Tomorrow, or created a podcast for their cause, what does that make the sector look like? I mean, is that a bet? Are we better for it?
Yeah, it's a legit question, man. I mean, creating is hard. It's, it's vulnerable. Something I've struggled with as I've been more and more public in this work. What I would say is that, does everyone need to create? No, not necessarily. But if you're going to be a social impact organization in 2026 and you're going to try and get your brand story out there, and you need support and you need brand awareness, then you do need to create, like, because you need to share, like the idea of like, we do good work behind the scenes. There's less and less viability in that model, in my opinion. And publishing is incredible. Like making stuff is great. Now I have a bias. I'm a creative person. The nature of that word means I like to make things from nothing or from raw ingredients or whatever. So it comes naturally to me, but you learn so much by putting yourself out there and creating that. I've often said, like, I think I know something until I sit down and try and write like a 1,500 word piece about it. I'm like, oh, I don't have this as figured out as I thought I did. So there's value even in creating, even if you don't publish, but that feedback loop that happens, that conversation with your community, it's so valuable that it's worth doing. Now, does the whole sector become like both a broadcaster and a consumer? Yeah, I think that's basically what's happening.
Honestly, to answer my own question, like, yeah, I think it would be good for the sector if we all started producing stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because then collectively we are, bombarding the airwaves with content that is good for the collective well-being, right? So like, I do think that would be good for everybody, every listener, to create something similar to Designing Tomorrow here.
I mean, for whatever reason, this reminds me of another thing that's been top of mind for me. And like, so much is like gone since the pandemic, especially, and just like with current culture, like digital. And like, yeah, digital is definitely not going away. But there seems to be this like very real, very like visceral and like timely shift back to in-person right now. In not just like a human way, but that too, but like especially in a professional way. I think like we are all yearning for that like human connection and like face-to-face, person-to-person conversation. I think podcasts are, and like this type of media, everything is TV kind of conversation, is like the closest you can get to that digitally without actually doing something in person. You know, a lot of times when you're thinking about this great content reset, I think part of that is like things moving back more into in-person again. Now, are events going to be the same as they were before? No, I think we need to get creative about like, how do we do these convenings, these conferences in a way that's not stuffy and just like so rigid that you don't actually get what you want out of it.
Yeah, isn't that interesting that like we all went remote, or not all of us, but so much of the workforce went remote during the pandemic. And some of us still really like that remote element of our jobs, yet we're also craving those in-person professional experiences, but like not at the workplace. Yeah. Right? Isn't that interesting that we're hungry for that community, but not in the traditional format that we would normally get it? I'm not sure what that means. I'm just observing this contradiction.
Yeah, I think it's part like that. The reason why it comes up for me is because like, I think people are naturally craving human connection. They always are. And I think we've been taught and through the psychology hacking of our devices that like, when I'm scared, when I'm bored, when I'm sad, I scroll my phone to get that. And I think everyone is realizing that that's bullshit. It's just not it. I mean, we're talking about not necessarily like New Year's resolutions, but like New Year, and like something I've been like very cognizant of as I've been trying to reset some of my own behaviors in my lifestyle is like, when I'm done with work, like my phone goes away. And that hasn't been true for me for a while. And I've been busy. I have excuses for why, blah, blah, blah. But like, man, the shift in my consciousness and my experience, spending time with my girls and my family, by doing that, it's like, it's embarrassing, honestly, like how much in that moment I like find myself instinctively like reaching for my phone when I'm bored, when I'm frustrated, when something happens that's like annoying, or just like anytime there's like a sense of negativity, the phone becomes this almost like adult pacifier. And I think this is relevant to the conversation in my mind because like so much of content generation and like brand strategy is like, how do we get our message out? How do we get our message out? And I think we all need to be thinking about that really holistically, not just about like, are we doing Google Ads or not this year?
So look, the great content reset. I mean, we got AI in front of us. We've got questions of in-person events. We've got questions of everything becoming TV. But as I think about like the history of the way we communicate with each other as humans, right? Like from only face-to-face to radio to, or letters to radio to TV to the internet to now, something has to be fundamentally true about how we communicate with each other and how, you know, people doing social impact work, which isn't new, like how they're communicating this. So like, what are some of the like fundamental truths of social impact communication that will never change no matter what the channel or the sort of technology of the moment offers?
Yeah, man. Whew. Okay, we could do another episode on this one. Let's try and hit some of the like heavy hitters here. So to me, I think there has to be some kind of crystallized vision of where you're going as an organization to be able to do this work at all well. If you don't have clarity around that, you don't know if a choice is a mistake or a distraction or aligned with your organization. So to me, it always comes down to like the orgs that I work with who are the most effective. There's the crystal clarity on where they're going. This is who we're becoming. This is what we're working for. This is who we're fighting for. And everything can be filtered through that lens, including this is the content we make and here's who it's for. And here's why these channels make sense because we have that clarity. So to me, like you have to always have that truth, or everything is just kind of a guessing game and it's going to just be kind of whack-a-mole and sporadic. We can get into talking about like styles of communication. There's a lot of research that shows that like there are things about like negative framing or like curiosity driven framing that like and like the hook. So like we'll point back to some episodes that I did all the way back in season 1 where I went deep on all that stuff. That I think is a skill. Like this is, we talk about doing the reps sometimes, and I think sometimes you got to just start and you got to see what works, but there are like actual skills in doing this work that are worth reading up on. So, but I think there's like more deeply like a truth that needs to be guiding this work that you're working towards. And there needs to be, in my opinion, like the goal should be, and this is the goal, a long time goal for us on this show, is like, the more real this can be, the better. Like the less this is about, let's create something polished, let's create something professional, let's create something that's like based on some kind of standard or what this should look like. And the more real it is, I think the better it performs. And that's been true in our experience. And I feel like we're getting a lot closer with that. Like this show feels more and more like our dinner conversations today than it did in season 2.
For sure.
By like a long shot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're dropping F-bombs these days, which I'm just like all here. I'm here for it. But I don't know if that answers your question, but like those are some of the like non-traditional things. Like, I mean, I could give you tactics, but I really think like that's where you should start.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's like, it's just, as an executive director, I'm thinking about like a shifting landscape. And if I can root myself in something that I know is going to be reliable no matter where the industry or content goes during this great content reset, then I can feel confident knowing that I'm putting out something that's going to be effective for our mission.
Yeah, I mean, to take it back to the top of the episode, like I do think that the more AI slop, if we want to use that term, comes in and pollutes these channels, the more anything that feels different than that becomes important. Whether that's a conversation on film between two human beings, or something kind of oddly related that's coming to mind for me right now is like I find myself listening to more and more live recordings of music versus studio recordings as like AI starts to come into music, and appreciating the imperfection there. One of the reasons I've always liked going to see live music is because every show is an experience. It's different. One of the reasons I love jazz, among other types of music, is because of the improvisation, the like one-offness of it. And so I do think I hope, and I think there's going to be kind of a resurgence and a yearning towards the human imperfection of the human experience being more and more prized, and kind of like the human factor in all of this work. This gets put under the authenticity lens, but you even think about just like the trends around like film photography and vinyl and like owned media that's like physical. Like this has been coming, and AI is just accelerating all of that.
Yeah. Well, hey, for all those executive directors and social impact leaders out there, this content reset is here, but stay with us through Designing Tomorrow this year. I think we're gonna be helping unpack all of it along the way. So
yeah, this is fun. I mean, I do think there's a lot more to unpack here that we'll do in future episodes. And listeners, if you're curious about like, hey, how do I show up right now in 2026 on my content strategy, check the show notes on this one. We'll be sure to put some tasty morsels in there for you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Jonathan.
If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe, or even leave us a comment. It really helps. Thank you. And thank you for all that you do for your cause and for being part of the movement to move humanity and the planet forward.